Has anyone lived in the walls of your house when you didn't notice? When I was in my very early 20s, my mom and I shared a house. We had a stalker. The first night we stayed in the house, someone got into our car. My mom happened to come outside, saw him, set off the panic alarm on the car and scared him away. My backpack had been in the car and he dumped the contents into the floorboard of the car but left the paycheck that I had just cashed, all the cash still in a bank envelope. The police said it seemed that they were searching for something specific and really questioned me about what that might be. But I have no idea. Police were able to get a partial palm print off the car but had no matches in their system. My mom and I were out doing yard work and found a phone cord under our deck. It connected into the phone box on the outside of the house. We called the phone company out and they said that they figured that someone had been using the cord to hook up a phone and lay under our deck and listen in on our phone calls. They removed the cord and put a lock on the phone box. We also frequently heard someone walking outside our windows at night. We would call the police and they would drive by but not see anyone. Another time all of the light bulbs from our exterior lights were removed. Once we came home and my mom realized that a pair of earrings and a stuffed animal that had been sitting on her dresser were missing. There was no sign of anyone having broken in, but those items never turned up and we were sure someone had been in the house. We frequently heard this weird thump and squeak noise that we could never figure out what caused it. Another time my mom was raking leaves at the front of the house and saw something in one of our bushes. It was a voice-activated recorder, wrapped in black plastic and tied to the trunk of one of our bushes. The recorder was tapped into our phone line. Someone had gotten under our house, drilled a hole through our foundation and ran a phone cord through the hole, into the recorder in the bush. We have no idea how our neighbors didn't see or hear this happening. The police, who were well aware of the issues by this point, now seem to realize that this was a serious, scary problem. They sent several officers out to investigate the recorder. We were in the house talking to an officer and heard the thump and squeak noise that we always heard. We told the officer that's the noise we can't identify. As it turns out, at that moment an officer was crawling under the house and had bumped a pipe. He was able to repeat the noise. The police figured that it was almost impossible to get into or out of the crawl space under our house without bumping that pipe. And we heard that noise a lot. The police think that whoever it was getting into the crawl space and lying under the house listening to us. He had been living there for months just listening and listening, and when I found that out it really creeped me out. We put a cover over the entrance and glued it down. We put sequins in a certain order in the glue so that we could tell if it had been removed and re-glued. It was all insanely creepy. We eventually moved. I moved in with my boyfriend in a second-floor apartment. I felt so much safer with people all around and figured that the stalking issue was behind me. Not long after we moved in I noticed that our caller ID wasn't working. I called the phone company and they informed me that a Mr. Kramer had called and requested that the caller ID service be turned off on our phone. I had a meltdown. I was so upset, first off because the phone company let some random person make changes on our phone line and secondly because apparently the issues were not behind me and they were planning something and didn't want the caller ID to show up. I put a password on our account so no changes could be made without it. And that was the last issue we ever had. I really think the caller ID issue was possibly unrelated. Maybe someone was accidentally making changes to the wrong account or something? Either way it was very creepy though I have to admit, if the person had wanted to do something bad to either one of us there were surely plenty of times that could have been done. It really seems they just wanted to observe us and scare us. My neighbor's TV has been playing nonstop for months. The landlord says nobody lives there. I moved to a new city about 5 years ago for a job, my first one straight out of college. I was allocated a small apartment in one of those sprawling high-rise buildings where every unit looked exactly the same, distinguished only by numbers, and where the notion of personal space was constantly challenged by the uninspiring soundproofing. The first few days were a mix of activities, getting accustomed to my new job, the unfamiliar urban landscape, and the general humdrum of city life. However, once the dust of the initial chaos settled, I noticed something peculiar. There was a constant low, almost indistinct, sound coming from the apartment next door. It resembled the muffled noise of a TV playing round the clock. Initially, I brushed it off, assuming my neighbor must be a night owl with an affinity for television. This sonic intrusion was not disruptive, but it was persistently present, especially in the quieter moments of my day. Something about it seemed unsettling, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Driven by a mix of irritation and curiosity, I decided to approach my neighbor about the noise. Walking up to the door of the neighboring apartment, I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, this time a little more forcefully. Still, no response. Confused, I decided to speak to the building manager, a middle-aged man named Gary. Upon hearing the apartment number, he frowned, perplexed. "That's not possible," he said. "That apartment's been vacant for months." The news made my stomach sink. I was certain about the persistent noise. Seeing my unease, Gary agreed to check the apartment with me. As we opened the door to the apartment, a wall of stale, sour air hit us. The place was entirely empty. Unoccupied, untouched, and in complete disarray, the apartment was a stark contrast to mine. But as we went further, we started hearing the faint noise. It was indeed a television. In a small corner room that could have been an office or a study, we found it. An old CRT television sat on the floor, the screen illuminating the dusty particles floating in the air. It was playing static, with the occasional glimpse of an image or the echo of a voice. The noise was more disturbing in this context, a lone sound in an otherwise abandoned place. Then, we noticed it. Beside the television, slumped in a moth-eaten armchair, was a figure. The sight was gruesome. It was a human, or at least, it had been. The body, still dressed in tattered clothing, was in an advanced state of decomposition. The scene was a grotesque tableau, the desolate room illuminated by the eerie glow of the television. Gary immediately called the police. It was later confirmed that the deceased was an elderly man named Harold. He was a recluse, with no known friends or family, living his last days alone and unnoticed. The cause of death was natural, but he'd been dead for months. His only companion seemed to have been the television, which he must have left on. Over time, the television had turned to static, creating the haunting sound that first led us to discover Harold's fate. It's hard to shake the image of Harold, dead and forgotten, sitting in his armchair. His face is what stuck with me the most. There was an eerie calmness to it that was hard to put into words. His eyes were open, blankly staring at the flickering TV screen, as if he'd just fallen asleep watching his favorite show. His skin had turned a shade I can only describe as unnatural. I remember the stillness of the room, broken only by the static hum of the television. It was like stepping into a scene frozen in time, a moment that should have been private but was instead shared with a complete stranger, me. That scene often comes back to me when I least expect it, in the middle of a work meeting or late at night when I can't sleep. It's as vivid now as it was then. I am glad that my wife's ex cheated on her. I know the title sounds bizarre, but hear me out. My wife and I used to be neighbors. I was working as an electrician at that time. I saw her the day she moved in. She looked really sad and lonely. I decided to help her move in because there was no one to do that for her. From then we used to bump into each other a lot. I wanted to speak more to her, but she never seemed interested in me. One day I saw her crying in front of the stairs. She looked really devastated. From there I got to know her story. She has dealt with a lot of health issues. She had multiple cysts in her breasts that she had to go in for operations. She was also suffering from PCOS, which actually affected her fertility. She used to be married to a man, but he cheated on her with her best friend and got her pregnant. Then he kicked her out and slapped her with divorce papers. I sat there with her because I knew she needed a real friend. I wasn't really expecting anything in return. We got closer and closer and I finally grew some balls to ask her out. I didn't care if she could give me kids or not. I just wanted to be with her because she is an awesome lady and life wasn't fair towards her. We dated for a few years and then got married. She has been my rock. I wanted to go back to school and finish my diploma and she has supported me through it. I always tell her that I'm really lucky to have her in my life. I never knew what family felt like until I married her. I grew up in an abusive family. It took me years of therapy to cope with it. But with her I feel like I have peace in my life. I love her so much that words are not enough to express it. Now, as I am writing this, she is sleeping on my lap while she is watching a Barbie marathon. I know one other thing about her. It is that she is pregnant and hasn't told me. The only reason I know is because I found her planner when I borrowed her laptop for something. I opened it and discovered she had planned to tell me about the pregnancy 3 days later on our wedding anniversary. Can't say I haven't noticed it yet. I have observed her breasts have become bigger and her moods have shifted. She also vomits in the morning. I will not spoil this surprise for her. I know it makes me sound like a bad person, but in a way I'm glad her husband cheated on her. Otherwise I wouldn't have had this angel in my life. I mean, think about it. If her husband hadn't cheated on her and left her, we would probably never meet and I would go through my life like a helpless person trying to cope with loneliness. I am glad it happened. And I am sure she feels that too. Just not the way I do. If I ever encounter her husband I will probably punch him first, then hug him and say, "Thank you and fuck you, you piece of shit." I just found out my fiancé has been roping me in my sleep. My fiancé and I have been together for almost 3 years. While we've had our fair share of problems, we've never had issues to this extent. To give some context, I'm the sole breadwinner. I work from home, but my fiancé takes care of our baby while I do so. My fiancé does not drink alcohol, and this was due to a previous situation where he blacked out and wrecked my apartment, but I do drink. He stopped drinking on his own accord, and has never acted like that since. I like to have some beers after work, and especially on the weekends. I ended up starting to drink liquor in place of beer, which I now know is fucking stupid, just because of my stressful days. I'm a software engineer. When I started this, on the weekends, I would get too drunk. Almost always. I take full blame for that, but every Friday night, without fail, I'd end up too drunk, smoking some weed, and off to bed I went. I was never sick or anything, but just a shot was too much for me. And so I'd just go to bed. This is why I blame myself. After a few weeks of switching to liquor, I'd wake up, not hungover or anything, just a normal wake up, and my fiancé would ask me crude questions, jokingly, like, "How is your asshole today?" The first time he asked me this, I laughed and went, "You are not serious," and he laughed too. Then we'd go about our day. But this happened quite a few times after. He'd always ask the morning after, "How's your asshole?" Or "How's your pussy?" Always weird, but I chalked it up to him just being a bit sour that I was drinking, since he does not. Eventually the question became, "Do you remember me fucking you last night?" And again, he said it jokingly. I never realized he was actually serious. This has happened maybe 20 times now. We have been having issues with our baby's sleep schedule. We take turns, as of lately, to get up with the baby when she wakes up early. She usually wakes up between 4 a.m. to 6 a.m., and it's been killing us. I stopped drinking liquor a few months ago because of the shitty hangovers and me being dead asleep. I have since switched back to beer and White Claws. Well, today was his day to wake up with the baby. I had 3 White Claws last night, over the course of maybe 4 hours, but I wasn't drunk. So, he did wake up with her, and a few hours later, still before I needed to be up for work, he came to lay her back down for a nap. I briefly woke up and acknowledged them. She sleeps in our room, and went back to sleep. The next thing I know, our room, which is pitch black due to our curtains, is lighting up sporadically. I see it under my eyelids. Eventually my eyes shoot open, and I realize that my fiancé is in bed with me, just laying the opposite way. I figured he was taking a nap too, maybe on his phone, so I repositioned and got comfy. But then the flashes of light continued. After a minute, I realized, while I was laying on my side, in a nightgown, with my legs spread a bit, that he was laying on the opposite end of the bed, under the covers, taking pictures in between my legs. When I realized this, I kinda froze. I thought maybe he was doing it as a joke. So I held still, and waited. But he kept going. Then I felt him jerking off in bed next to me a moment later. The flash must have gone off a good 15 times. To give a bit more context, I have never once known this man to jack off. Ever. Never once. Never before SX, nothing. And I know what you're all thinking, but no, he doesn't do it in private. He doesn't. I always thought it was a bit strange, but whatever. Finally he got up, left, and a little while later I woke up and went downstairs to say hi. After a few minutes, he goes, "How's your asshole?" And I couldn't help it, but my laugh was really nervous. I'm assuming he caught on to that, and goes, "You know I was jerking it to you, right? Because you wouldn't give it up last night?" I truly didn't know how to respond. After a few seconds I just kinda laughed and went, "No way," but he was serious. He then hit his phone for a second, I'm assuming deleted some shit, then showed me the pictures he took in between my legs while I was sleeping. I was shocked. I didn't know how he'd react if I just started outright calling him a creep, so I told him that I looked gross, and to delete them. He wouldn't. So now here I am. I had to call out of work today because I feel physically sick. All those times he told me he had sex with me, I do not remember. I was already asleep. And like I mentioned, I thought he was kidding. But once I started piecing things together, like a piece of a corner wrapper of a condom being in the bed. Clean up towels. Things like that confirmed he did indeed have sex with me while I was passed out. I'm starting to think the only reason he's been honest about it is because he thinks I might remember. The only time I ever have was this morning, which scares me even more, but here I am. I know what I need to do, but I don't at the same time. I'm sick. I feel gross. I feel weird. I feel used. I didn't want to think of this as rope. Hell, I still don't. But at the same time, I had no fucking idea this was even happening. I'm very angry, not necessarily with him, but at myself for letting this happen. What about my daughter? What the fuck? I'm terrified for her. He's taking a nap now. I don't know how to get him out of my house without calling the cops. So I guess that's exactly what I need to do. Wish me luck, my whole being is broken right now. My boyfriend told me that I'm uglier than most of the women he's been with. So a couple of nights ago we were drinking and discussing how men often feel the need to put their height in their dating profile and how it's silly that a lot of women will go for someone solely on their height. He then said how in his friend group, even though his friends are more successful than him, he always got more girls because he was taller. Then out of nowhere, he said, "Yeah, you're on the lower end of who I've been with." When my jaw dropped, he then said there have been models. I could tell I was about to burst into tears, so I calmly told him that and went upstairs. I felt like I'd been punched in the heart. I know I'm not model pretty, but still. Ouch. What makes it even more upsetting is he's often told me how I'm the ideal person for him looks-wise, told me I'm gorgeous and hot before. He's also told me he's basically only with me because of how I look. Him attacking my personality is a common thing. I have ADHD and my ADHD traits really piss him off, yet now suddenly he's settling for me because he's been with way better before. He started texting me and telling me I was being irrational, that I was throwing a tantrum. Then I said I'm not on the lower end. I went downstairs and tried calmly talking to him about it, but he just went on about how I was terrible for running away and how he only said that because I'd said something earlier that upset him. That he didn't mean it. He was still saying this all very angrily, so I don't know if he meant it or if he was just telling me what I wanted to hear. He was very defensive. Just trying to talk to him about what he said, even very calmly, made him yell and scream at me and throw a beer bottle on the ground. Said, "I mean, come on, you have frizzy hair and a big butt." Even though my butt is clearly his favorite thing about me, and one time he said it's probably the only reason he's still dating me. The only thing I can think of that I said that maybe made him upset was not too long before he said the lower end comment. He was berating me about my personality and how I'm selfish apparently and all this stuff. He said he was the best guy I could get. Nobody else would put up with me. I said something like, "Trust me, I could get a lot of guys." And I'm pretty sure that's what pissed him off. Either way, I can't stop thinking about that stupid comment. He is a good-looking guy and I often feel like I'm not good enough to be with a good-looking person. He knows I suffer from body dysmorphia. I honestly don't really have any idea what I look like. I just know I'm not conventionally attractive. I know he's attracted to me, but I think he is maybe insecure about wanting to be with a conventionally attractive girl and I don't fit the bill. I don't even know. He's also told me before that I have a frumpy, peach-shaped body and it's so hard to reconcile these comments with the ones he said before about how I'm the ideal girl for him, looks-wise and how attracted he is to me. My heart hurts and I just want to hide under the blankets and never come out and never have anyone look at me ever again. I don't know how to feel or what to believe anymore. I forgave the person who shot and killed my brother. I know this is hard to imagine or believe, but I truly want you to know that I am not crazy, but in fact quite the opposite. My brother was my best friend. We grew up together doing everything side by side. Me and him had this close bond that you couldn't quite explain. Well, fast forward to our college years, where me and him went to the same university. He was a sophomore and I was a junior, and we lived about 10 minutes apart from each other. Well, one Friday night while we were drinking at this bar that we always liked to go to because he was able to get in. We were winding down our night as it was getting late, and since the bar is really close to our places, we normally just walked back. About 5 minutes into our routine walk, we normally split off in opposite directions to get to our respective places, but this time I was a little more concerned for his well-being because he was insanely plastered. When we reached the split-off point, I offered to walk him back to his to make sure he made it back safe, but he seemed to instantly sober up, or at least act like it, and said, No, I'm fine, don't worry about me, it's just a 5-minute walk back to mine." We joked a little bit and I decided that everything would be fine and we would split off like normal. Well, fast forward an hour and I am woken up by a knock at my door. At first, I was insanely scared, because who knocks on a door at around 3 a.m.? Well, I ended up making my way to the door to find 2 police officers. I opened it and they asked if I knew, insert my brother's name. I said yes, and what they told me next made me go into shock. Your brother has been shot tonight, sir, and we don't know how to tell you this, but he has passed. I felt like I wanted to immediately slam the door on them and run up the stairs, almost as a way to cope and say to myself this isn't happening. But I didn't. I actually just ended up standing there saying nothing for the next 20 to 30 seconds. They didn't wait for a reply, but continued saying, we know you probably need some time to take this all in and more, but whenever you are ready, we're going to need a statement from you. I told them I understood and that I would give them a call when I was ready. Well, I'll skip all the boring stuff, but basically here is what happened. My brother, although he acted sober at the end of our walk together, could clearly be seen on multiple doorbell cameras walking down the street near his house, tripping over stuff and barely being able to walk. Instead of going to the house on the right of the street, which is his, he made the grave mistake of walking to the other house on the other side. We had had no previous interactions with the people that lived there before, and I made sure to clear that up with cops so that they wouldn't think it was premeditated. Based off of that, they determined what happens next is all an incident. He walked into the house, as the door was for some reason unlocked. The owner apparently was in his bedroom at the time, when he heard a loud slamming noise, presumably the door opening. He got his gun immediately and told that whoever was in the house needed to get now and that he had said gun. Well, my brother, who was obviously plastered, either didn't hear or comprehend what this guy was saying and just kept walking farther into the house. This is where I'll skip the dark details, but you probably get what happens next. I struggled with this for months and months after it happened, maybe even longer. I cried myself to sleep sometimes, knowing that he wouldn't be there to text in the morning like we normally did. The little things you take for granted, and his passing made me realize all the little niche things he used to do. After some time, one of my professors who was very close with me could tell that I was still going through a tough time, and he suggested that he come with me to his church service the next Sunday. I don't know what was in me that said yes, but I did, and it changed my life for the better. For the next month or two, I learned about the Bible and its word, but most importantly, compassion and loving your own enemy. I struggled with the idea of it, but I knew that it might be for the best, and with my newfound purpose in life, I felt more ready than ever to take that step. My brother's killer's hearing was coming around the corner, and when it finally came and family testimony started, I was the first in the chair. In that chair I repeated a very heartfelt message to my brother's killer, and I couldn't help but notice the tears rolling down his face as I read it. The last words in that long letter read, I forgive you, and wish the best for you in all your years left on this beautiful world we all get to call home. I am a woman who was falsely accused of a sex crime. It ruined my life. Every time I've read about false rope accusations on the internet, it's always been a story about a woman accusing a man. I want people to hear my story. When I was 18, I took a high school photography class with mostly freshmen. Since I was a transfer student, I had to make up credits most seniors had already finished. I had my locker in the freshman hallway and ate lunch with the younger students because that's where the school had space for me. Most of my friends were freshmen and sophomores and I didn't think anything of it. My mental illnesses have left me a bit emotionally stunted, so I always felt immature for my age. At the time, my psychiatrist was trying to find a medication that would cure my panic attacks. I was taking a lot of prescription sedatives that made my brain fuzzy. It was hard to focus or retain detailed memories. It felt like I was a little drunk all the time. One day when we didn't have school, a boy from my class invited me to hang out at his grandma's house. He had some chairs and a TV set up in the garage. I remember him being verbally flirtatious, and the next moment, I was on the floor with my pants down. I tried to get up but felt the weight of him holding me down as he inserted something I couldn't see, fingers, into my kitty. He was younger, but taller and heavier than me. I tried to shake it off like a bad dream, but the next day I was bleeding and in pain, not from a period, so I went to the school nurse and told her what happened. Biggest mistake of my life. She told the police. I gave my side of the story to a female officer and she went to interview the boy, who told her I wanted it. Imagine my surprise when I got a notice in the mail that I was being charged with felony criminal sensual conduct with a minor. The boy was a few months under the age of consent. A year of legal battles followed. My therapist defended my innocence, mentioning her concern about my unusually low sex drive. The boy's own parents spoke in my defense as well, telling the judge that he had brought other girls home when he wasn't supposed to. It didn't matter. The prosecuting attorney told me that if I really believed I was innocent, I could take the case to trial, but if I lost, I could face 5 years in prison and time on the sex offender registry. If I plead guilty, I'd get a stay of adjudication, the charge would drop off my record after 5 years, and I could continue my life on unsupervised probation. I was 19 then and had just been accepted into college. I took the plea because I was terrified of being locked up. I just wanted to move far away from that place and be a normal teenager. I didn't fully grasp that the charge would never really go away. During the pandemic, my grandpa died and I inherited enough money to apply for an expungement. I defended myself and won my case in a virtual hearing, but it's still not completely gone. My FBI background check states there may be arrest data on file, though it doesn't say why. I'm now in a long-distance relationship and worried we will never be able to live in the same place. His country requires a clean police certificate, and if I apply to sponsor him to come to the US, I have to declare my sex charge on the application and prove that I'm without a reasonable doubt no danger to my partner. I'm not a danger to anyone. This event left me so scared that I've never been able to let someone touch me intimately without pain. My current boyfriend has been very patient and understanding, but many other relationships have ended because of my lack of desire. The guy who hurt me is married now. He gets to be with the person he loves. It's not fair. My partner and I both cheated on each other with the same person. Me and my partner Emma have been dating for a little over 3 years. Both of us are close friends with this girl Vanessa, who is considerably attractive and has previously hinted that she likes me as more than just a friend. One day, Vanessa sent me a couple of nudes of herself out of the blue. This was during a time when Emma and I were having a major fight and agreed to go to North Carolina for a bit. I was feeling particularly lonely and selfish, so I sent some back, and it all went downhill from there. We then sexted for a week or so and eventually ended up sleeping together. I immediately regretted it after the fact and didn't know what to do. This was around 2 weeks ago. Fast forward to yesterday. I still hadn't confessed my infidelity. Vanessa adds all 3 of us to a shared group chat and immediately sends out a bunch of screenshots and evidence of me cheating. I'm so screwed, I thought. I started panicking when Vanessa suddenly sent out even more screenshots, except these showcased Emma sending her nudes and discussing how they had sex, and how amazing it was. Vanessa then leaves the group chat. Needless to say, I was in shock. Neither Emma nor I said anything to one another until the end of the day. She showed up at my apartment at around 10 p.m. but wasn't mad. Instead of talking about what had happened, we just cuddled on my couch for a couple of hours as if everything was fine. At some point, she said, "We need to be in an open relationship." I agreed with her and that was that. Both my partner and I have severe BPD and a lot of other mental health issues. I'm personally very impulsive, and have a tendency to do harmful things without putting much thought into them. We do happen to be in therapy though. We've both experienced a lot of toxic and abusive relationships in the past and have previously cheated on each other. This is why the cheating itself wasn't that surprising to either of us, it was more so the fact that we cheated with the same person. I also want to clarify that by open relationship she meant that we should be able to sleep with other people, not date them. We eventually fell asleep in each other's arms afterward. We woke up this morning, exchanged a few I love yous, and started our days. Neither the cheating incident nor the big fight before that has been addressed, and something tells me that they never will be. I had to type this out because I can't stop thinking about how we are both incredibly toxic individuals, yet somehow perfect for each other.